Some folks that we've done this with, because we're going to ask you to go back to your childhood, not childhood, but what got you here.
Right.
Because that says a lot about what you've done in the last 2 decades or 3 decades.
Yeah.
Some people said, I'd like a copy of that rough cut information for my grandkids or great-grandkids. And after it's all said and done, we may do some customized things for people.
Okay.
But funny story.
We also,
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, we were also, it was, I think it was Johnny Isaacson, or no, it was Bob Krillman.
Yeah.
Wanted us to cut out all the wonderful things that he said about his wife. And then just make a video to give to his wife. Just look at all the things.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So people have used it for a lot of things, just beyond this tape.
Okay.
Funny story. Conley Ingram interviewed Conley. It was a great interview.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can imagine. Yeah.
And he had stories, and he also had some stories he couldn't tell. But anyway, so we had a great video session, and then I ran into Lark, his daughter.
Who?
Lark Ingram. She's on Superior Court now. That's his daughter.
Oh, okay.
But I ran into Lark, and I told her what I'd done.
Yeah.
She said, I'd like a copy of that. And I said, well, it's not cut. It's raw footage. She said, I want a copy of that. So I said, okay. I called Ty. Ty sent him the uncut version of things. And she sent it out to her kids, which are Conley's grandkids. Yeah. So they would know about their grandfather in ways they've never heard.
Right.
And 2 weeks later, the phone rang, and I looked, it's Conley. Hello, David, this is Conley. I said, well, how you doing? I said, good. He said, I talked to Lark, and she said that you sent her our videotape. I went, oh, he's going to kill me. He said, my wife and I are on our way back. We want a copy of it.
Yeah.
So history's important.
What will happen? Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Well, and again, this is just conversational. If you want to take a break or whatever, this is
okay.
We'll cut out all the stuff that we need to.
Okay.
Tell me about yourself. Where were you born? Where'd you go to college? And sort of how you got to this point as a superintendent.
Interesting question. I was born in Pasadena, Texas, a suburb of Houston. My dad came out of World War II. He actually lied about his age to get in the military. And so he was a relatively young man when the war ended. He met my mom, and they got married. And I was born in 1948. And they brought me home to a house that the two of them built, a World War II house. And they raised 3 children in that house. And after the 3 kids grew up and moved off, they continued to live in that house until we took them to the cemetery. Not many people live in a house for 60 years. But they did. And but along the way, they found a way to help me go to Baylor University in Waco, Texas. And I majored in music and became a music educator.
What year was this?
Earned my degree in 1971. And met my wife-to-be there. She was in music. And we both of us graduated in 71. She started her master's degree. And so I went and started my teaching career at St. Albans Elementary School in Waco, Texas, teaching the 3rd grade and also doing music for the school. And after a year or two, she finished her master's, and we decided to move back to Georgia, which she was a Georgia peach. She was from Atlanta. And her dad was the first executive music secretary of the Georgia Baptist Convention, Dr. Paul McCommon. So, and his wife was an educator and knew a lot of folks in education in the metro Atlanta area, specifically in Clayton County, which is where we began our teaching careers, in Clayton County. Well, it wasn't long, I finished my master's degree at the University of Georgia, and met one of the most interesting men. I still remember him today. He was my major professor. I was just assigned to him as a master's candidate. Dr. Lamort, Michael W. Lamort, actually took time out of Saturday, and my wife and I drove up for the Christmas holidays. This is while we were still in Texas. Had not moved to Georgia yet. And I wanted to meet him. And we sat down and planned out my master's course of study. And I made the mistake of saying to him, Dr. Lamort, I really look forward to writing a master's thesis under you. At which point he looked up at me, took his glasses off, looked me right in the eye, and said, Mr. Barnett, I'm not sure you'll ever write a thesis I'll accept. Well, when I finally regained my breath and my sense of being, we ended the session. It was a drizzly day at Adderhold Hall on a Saturday morning, and I got in the car. My wife was sitting in the passenger seat. I grabbed a hold of the steering wheel, and I said to her, do you know what that son of a bitch said to me? He infuriated me. Looking back on it, he did it for a purpose. So I finished my master's degree. Dr. Lamort, I actually made a point of taking every course I could from him. He was a school law professor and a PhD from Berkeley. And he actually took a shine to me and was talking to me about doing some graduate work there. And but I needed to work. So he said, you go ahead and get a few years of experience, and if you think you want to do some further graduate study, let me know. So I took the graduate record exam, got accepted to the doctoral program, and Dr. Lamort was assigned as my major professor. So I guess experience is the best teacher. I sat down with him and we planned out my doctoral studies, which had an emphasis in law and finance. And we ended up the meeting with me saying to him, Dr. Lamort, I really look forward to writing a dissertation that you'll find acceptable. And again, he took those glasses off, looked me right in the eye, and said, I'm not sure you'll ever write a dissertation I'll find acceptable. It was like a hot poker was stuck to me. Because after all, I had taken his courses, aced them, done well. And here he tells me this. I walked out of that room and promised myself I was going to show him. And again, he did it for a reason. So I ended up earning my doctorate at the University of Georgia in 1983. Well, by that time, a fellow down in Griffin, who was superintendent of schools, Dr. Charles Green, unknown to me, had called my major professor. I was in the doctoral program and had done all the coursework and was coming up on writing my dissertation. And he said to Dr. Green, "Give me one name. I'm looking for a high school principal." Dr. Green gave him my name. Dr. Lamort gave Dr. Green my name. Dr. Green got in touch and said, "I'd like to interview you." So I went to Griffin and interviewed with Dr. Green and the board. And the next thing I know, they're making an offer for me to become the youngest principal of Griffin High School, which at that time, in 1982, was the largest high school in the state of Georgia. And I was just barely, 31, 32 years old. And so they hired me in Griffin. And within a few months, we had passed a tax measure to build a new high school. And so I oversaw the building and construction of the new Griffin High School.
How many kids did you have in your program at that point?
At that point, we had like 3,200 in grades 10, 11, and 12. And that was a large school for that time. And so I was the Griffin High School principal for 8 years. I think that's still the record. It's a difficult, very time-consuming job.
Well, you know, I had a conversation with Chris Ragsdale 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about the reality. The demographics are changing so fast in Cobb County. If they voted to keep him right now, it'd be 4-3. After this next election, it could be 3-4. And, you know, they could ask him to retire.
Yeah.
And that's what you face, I'm sure, down there. The board is, you don't want to get in politics, but you can't help it.
Right. Yeah. The only thing you can do as superintendent is to do the right thing and let the chips fall where they fall. And that was the guiding principle for me, because there were a lot of difficult decisions that had to be made. But anyway, I enjoyed my days in Griffin, and I was there for 8 years. And then the board from Cartersville came visiting, and they asked me to become their superintendent. So I went from the high school principalship straight into the superintendency. And I had more students in the high school, one high school, than they had in K-12 in the whole district. And so, and I didn't have the pressures of running a school day to day. And I thought I had landed in nirvana. In Griffin, parents were coming through the door as I was driving up with one concern or another. And everybody wants to talk to the guy at the top. And when I'd go home, they'd start calling the house. You just couldn't get away from it. But when I went to Cartersville and was superintendent, it was a whole different ball game. And it was the same here in Marietta. So I enjoyed my days in Cartersville. I was there for 9 years as superintendent. And then the Marietta board asked me to come and be their superintendent. And I accepted and served for 6 more years as superintendent. So I spent about half my career as superintendent either in Cartersville or Marietta.
What were the years at Marietta?
I came to Marietta, started July 1, 1999, and retired July 1, 2005.
You know, I was listening to you. There's a story I told at the, you know, we have Teacher of the Year event and all the,
Sure.
We have this thing we do at the church and all that kind of stuff. And I told the story of Miss Brock. Miss Brock was my chemistry teacher, and in high school.
Yeah.
And she was one of those teachers that really cared about her students.
Right.
And so one day she asked me, I was a junior in high school, she said, what are you thinking about doing, the rest of your life, your career? I said, I don't know, Miss Brock. She said, well, you're very good in sciences and math. I might suggest you think about going into engineering. And I was a redneck in South Georgia, in Berrien High School.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, I don't want to drive trains.
Yeah.
she said,
right.
no, that's not it. And so later I had a conversation with her, and I said, what schools would you recommend for engineering? She said, well, Georgia Tech, Auburn, Georgia Tech, at Clemson, or whatever. And I said, well, Miss Brock, I don't know how. I don't have any money. My father's family is very poor, and I didn't really know that growing up. So I've got to find some way to put myself through school. She said, you ought to get on the co-op program. And I said, where's the best co-op program? She said, the one at Auburn University is the best one in the Southeast. She called me up. I got accepted in the co-op program in my senior year in high school, and I went to that job, and things just happened on my career from there. And then I had 4 great children. I got 6 great grandchildren. And I put on the screen Miss Brock. And then I put on the other screen one of my grandkids. And I said, well, for her, this person would not be on this earth.
Right.
And I don't know where I'd have gone if Miss Brock hadn't taken an interest in me.
Yep.
You described this gentleman in your career that affected your life.
Yeah. Dr. Lamort made a profound impression on me. But he was the second one. The first one was my high school choral music teacher. And he took such an interest in me and others that he was a Baylor graduate. And he invited me, along with a couple of others, to go with him to a Baylor football game and to meet a professor in the School of Music at Baylor University and actually audition. And so I went on a weekend with my teacher, and he introduced me to Dr. Ewell Porter, who was the director of choirs for Baylor University. We hit it off big time, and I ended up going to Baylor University because this one teacher took an interest, just like yours took an interest in you. And that put me on a path that put me here today.
You've had an interesting history, and we'll get to the Marietta school system in a minute. But talk for a minute about what you had behind you supporting you, your spouse, family.
Oh, my wife has been an inspiration. She's smarter than me. She's got a lot of insight, and she was with me every step of the way. Even when I thought I was going to quit, you get to those points in life when you think I'm just going to quit this doctoral program. I've got a little girl that's growing up without me. I've got a wife that's having to take care of things while I drive to Athens to take courses. And then when I get home, I have to seal myself up to write a dissertation. And you give up a lot of family time, and that takes a toll on you. But she was there to pick up the pieces, to fill in the gaps, and to make it possible for me to continue. So I owe a lot to her, and to my family as a whole.
I tell a lot of people that ask me the same question. I'll go through all the stuff that she helps, or she did to help me in my life and career. But one thing for sure that she would always do is when I walked through the door, I was not the president, CEO of the Cobb Chamber. I was a man that worked for her. and she'd bring me back down to earth.
And that's a very hard lesson for some folks to understand.
Yeah.
But that's true.
Yeah. And she would tell me things nobody else would tell me.
Yeah.
You're wearing the wrong outfit.
Right.
I watched you talk up in front of this room, and what you said was inappropriate. And when you need to do some small talk, this is the way you should do it.
even for this interview, she said, I suggest you wear a shirt with no food stains on them. So.
Well, when you got to Marietta, tell me about what you found in that school system. What were the strengths and weaknesses when you got there? You have a reputation of taking this school to a whole new level.
Yeah. When the board asked me to interview, they had, I'm sure, 2 or 3 others that they were interviewing. So I came to Marietta on a Saturday and met in the law offices of Lynn Rainey. He was on the board at that time. And as I understand it, the board had set up about 3 interviews that day or more, each one 2 hours in length, so I had 2 hours. So I showed up at the appointed time. I think I was probably the last one on the list for that day. And the 2 hours started out as most would suspect. Each board member was allotted 2 or 3 questions, and we went one round and then another round. I was answering the questions as truthfully and as I could, and so the time was about up, and they had one last question, and that question really cut against the grain for me at that particular time. And the question was, what do you find to be the hardest part of your job? I thought about it a second. I actually started not to give them the heartfelt response that I gave them. But I decided that if they hadn't heard it, this is the best time for them to hear it. And I looked them in the eye and said, standing graveside with parents, trying to find the words that would bring some comfort. There was stunned, deafening silence in that room. That is absolutely the worst part of a job for an educator. So I left out of there that day, got in my car and drove back to Cartersville. I thought to myself, if they didn't know it, they know it now. So I got a call from the board, and I ended up going to work for Marietta Board of Education, July 1, 1999. Very, very difficult as a superintendent to have to deal with the eventualities of life. And so they brought me on, and the day I sat down in the superintendent chair, my phone began to ring off the hook because the contractors started taking down trees on Whitlock Avenue in preparation for a new high school building. And the excitement began.
Did Otis call you?
Matter of fact, he did, but that's probably a story I don't need to get into.
Oh, please get into it.
We've had people that were very honest, and I'm going to actually, Ty and I are going to interview Otis at the end, and we're just going to tell him.
No, that's like Otis Sr.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Otis Jr.
Yeah.
The third. we're going to tell the truth when we do this video. I said,
Yeah.
there are people that did not like your father, and there's
Yeah.
people that loved your
Yeah.
father, and
Yeah.
some in the middle.
Yeah.
And we asked people to just tell it like it is, like Bernie Brown. Otis was killing Bernie Brown when he was trying to build a hospital. I was just beating him up, and he was on front page getting banged up in front of
I can understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he sat down with us. He told that story. So, yeah, tell us something. Think about it later and don't want to. What happened? That was a critical point in the history of Cobb County and Marietta.
And also, before we publish anything and put it out, we'll let you sign off on everything, and if it's real bad, we can cut it out later.
Well, it's, let me just condense it all down to there was a misunderstanding when the SPLOST was passed to build the new Marietta High School, and the board, the legal documents that the people voted on had the SPLOST, and inside that SPLOST was a bond, a 20-year bond. And the misunderstanding at some point was if one passed and the other didn't, we're okay. If both passed, we'll use one to pay off the other, and that's okay. So nobody considered the question, what if both passed? And both passed.
I was on that campaign. It was really done well by everybody.
Yeah, and so the board had the money from the SPLOST and money from the bond, and they budgeted the full amount. One was not used to pay off the other. But they, in their defense, needed to do so. And the reason they needed to do that was because the figures that had been put out about what it was going to cost to build a new high school were grossly underestimated. Nobody in the school system had been in charge of a building program of that magnitude.
Do you remember what it was, what they estimated, what it finally was? And I'm probably going to get to it anyway, but about how much was estimated and what did it end up coming in? Rough number.
Oh, I don't recall, because you got a 5-year SPLOST in there.
Yeah,
I'd be
but it was
I know what the high school was, and just the high school portion was $58 million. And but we renovated all of the schools and put new HVAC systems in and did all kinds of work in all of the buildings. But in addition to that, we built this new high school. They had estimated that the cost of the new high school would be $35 million. You couldn't build a high school for $35 million, not back then. And they had estimated the cost of the land to be, I don't know, $2 million, somewhere around there. I'm going by memory on this now. But the land cost over $6 million. So there were grossly underestimates on the actual building cost and land cost alone. So when I sat down and began to run the school system, I'd been in office about 2 weeks. I was getting ready to go into a board meeting. And Otis called my office, Otis Sr., and he said, I hear that this high school is grossly over budget. And I said, well, I don't think so. But I got the figures here if you'd like for me to give them to you. And I called off, the construction cost and the land cost, and then you got all the furnishings that you got to buy for a large school. Technology, and when I finished giving him the numbers, he was adding it all up. I'm 2 minutes from going into a board meeting, one of the first ones of my tenure, and he said, "Are you telling me that this building is $20 million over budget?" "No, sir, I'm not telling you that. We got the money." And that's when it all started. And so they did. They had the money. And the board decided to use the money for what the people approved. And so that infuriated some. And but all of that infuriated feelings dissipated when we opened the doors to the new high school. And that high school now is 17 years old. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe. Opened it up in 2002. It's now 2019. And still looks great from the road.
And again, we'll go back and forth later. We'll edit it in different orders anyway. A couple of things that are important for a leader, from my perspective, is they have to have a vision for what needs to be done and the courage to get there.
That's right.
And the second thing a good leader's got to do is prepare for their successor.
Right.
Develop people to be principals, develop people to be assistant principals.
Right.
Dr. Emily Limbeck came in after you.
Right.
And you trained her, and she gives you full credit for that.
Right.
I want you to talk about that role, those two issues, if you would mind. How important it is to get a vision and have the courage to go through all the rigmarole. Otis was a part of it.
Yeah,
there were others.
Just like the mentors that helped me along the way. My high school teacher, my major professor at the University of Georgia, Dr. Charles Green, superintendent, who gave me my first big break in running a high school. I've been able to help some others along the way. Actually, 5 different people who I trained went on to become superintendents in the state. And Emily was one of them. She's one of the finest. She's not the only one. When I came to Marietta had an excellent assistant superintendent by the name of Kelly Henson. Kelly was a great educator, still is. Kelly and I would be in the office around 5:30 every morning, have coffee, talk about what needs to get done that day. And he was in charge of instruction. So he was the academic side of the person that I leaned on for academic improvement. And during those days, there was a big uprising among parents and legislators about social promotion. And it needed to be stopped. And I agreed it needed to be stopped. I called Kelly in and said, I want you to take the lead, develop a board policy. We're going to stop social promotion. Well, that was a big task, but Kelly was up to it. He developed one of the finest policies. It took months, but he developed it, brought it to me, I approved it, we took it to the board and they approved it. that one instance, he did many, many other things well, but that one thing put him on the point. I knew it would, and as soon as he finished it, the state legislature took notice, the governor took notice, and he had 5 school districts coming to talk to him about being their superintendent. And he left, went to Floyd County as superintendent. And when he retired from Floyd County, the state wouldn't let him go. They hired him to become the executive director of the Georgia Professional Standards Commission. This is the licensing group that gives teachers their license. They also discipline teachers for things that they shouldn't do. And he just recently retired from there. He probably served them another 10 years. Kelly Henson was an excellent educator. Emily was hired to fill Kelly's job. And she proved to be the very same type. For whatever reason, I've had the unique opportunity to be able to attract highly qualified people who were self-starters and would get the job done. So Emily came on, and she immediately started turning the academic screws, and we started producing better and better academic performance. And along that way, she and I kicked around the idea of starting a magnet elementary school. DeKalb County had what was called Kitteridge Elementary, still do. And Kitteridge was a unique public school where the students had to score in the 75th percentile on a nationally normed test in order to be considered. And we brought this concept to the board, and when the public heard about it, which was when we brought it to the board, there were all kinds of concerns, just like you were talking about. You got to have a vision, and then you've got to see your way through the obstacles to get there. And the obstacles were that this was going to be an all-white elementary school, just for the elite. But when we opened the school, we had 1/3 white, 1/3 black, and 1/3 Hispanic. And what everybody suddenly realized was that the color of those kids' skins may have been different, but the color of their brains were all the same.
This gives me a good opportunity. One of the themes we have in here is that in our Cobb County, and that's the cities too, we had a very unique way of making decisions where if you did the right thing, the public would support you and go through hard things. Ward Barnes talked about it real quick. We're just labeling the Cobb way of doing things. And it's different in other places. It's just what Paul Quinn will talk about. Cobb County has never had a major racial issues. And your school has as much diversity as any school.
Right.
Because I consider that a major milestone in a period of time, several periods of time in your tenure there, where that could have become a problem. The schools are the first place that happens, right?
Right.
Okay. Talk a little bit about diversity and what you did and your team did to try to make sure. You just gave a great example.
That's one example. I was very, very pleased to see the racial makeup of that magnet school here in Marietta. But we had another situation where we needed to redistrict kids. We had too many kids in one school, not enough in another, and so forth. And but the African American community only wanted you to do what was right, and that's what I admire about them. That's all I wanted to do. We had the same goals. We just needed a way to get there, and we worked through those problems. And when that magnet school opened up, and they saw that what the kids were doing, that magnet school, by the way, ranks in the top 5, 6 in the state of Georgia, year in and year out, on any measure you want to take. So we're real proud of it. But we did lots of things to be inclusive and to include everybody. And we tried many different approaches, from SAT classes to help the kids improve their scores in SATs, to all kinds of programs. But yeah, Marietta is a unique district, and it has been since the days of desegregation. Historically, Marietta was never placed under federal review like DeKalb County was. DeKalb County remained under federal review for more than 50 years.
What does that mean?
That means that during the days of desegregation and busing, the districts had done some things to raise the ire of the federal people and trying to segregate races through their schools. Marietta, being on the front end, which is typical of Marietta, went to the federal government, sat down, hammered out an agreement as to how they were going to handle desegregation, and did so, and thereby avoided being under federal review in their school system. We were never under federal review. And I can tell a funny story about DeKalb County. The superintendent, I can't come up with his name right now, but this has been 50 years they were under federal review, had been called to federal court to explain some things under this federal review that the DeKalb County school system is doing. And the judge asked the superintendent why he should declare the school system unitary, which would take them out from underneath the review. And the superintendent responded saying, well, Judge, the original complainants are all grown and gone. The original attorneys who tried this case are all dead. The board members who were responsible are all dead. And quite frankly, Judge, I'm not feeling so well myself. The judge took them out from underneath unitary. And that wasn't but, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago.
One thing that we discovered, Ty and I have, as Bell Bomber Plant came in, at one point we had 40,000 people.
Oh,
the
yeah.
number varies all over the place.
Yeah.
But as it grew, if the schools did not grow with the needs,
right,
we could have had some serious problems. And we
oh, yeah.
Years. And that's why K-12 is so important. As this Southern Poly and KSU, they play a role, but a different role. Tell me what kind of partnerships you had with the business community to make sure that your schools were able to serve the volume of kids and the type of kids.
Well, when I first came to Marietta, business community, which I made a special effort to get involved with, were all telling me that the kids coming out of the school district were deficient in computer technology, and that they needed to know word processing. They needed to know how to do a PDF. They needed to know how to do PowerPoint. And if I could get them to have those skills, they would pick it up at their end and customize it to their jobs. So with the SPLOST money, we brought in laptops. You got to start with the teachers. If the teachers don't use it and the teachers don't understand it, how are the kids going to know it? So we started with the teachers, and we bought laptops for every teacher in the school district. And some of the teachers latched onto those computers and did some wonderful things with them. Others used the box that they came in to hold the door open. And it was with those teachers that I had an issue. And so once everybody understood that the superintendent expected not only to use the computers, but to make sure the students used the computers that were put in the classrooms as well. And the students started experimenting with the computers. And all of a sudden there was an explosion in the classrooms, starting at the high school and the middle school, that just absolutely astounded me and others. Matter of fact, I wrote an article for the School Administrator, which is a publication of the American Association of School Administrators, about how we were using technology. And it got published and went nationwide. We had special ed teachers, I'll just give you one example, who would take the computer and tape a special ed child doing a specific skill, which was in their individual education program. And when the parents would come in, she would not only be able to tell the parents about their child and their skill level and how they were improving, but show them by running that tape through their computer. So it was a wonderful teaching tool, and it just went on from there. We started having middle schoolers doing PowerPoint presentations for science, and they were phenomenal for kids that young to be able to put something together like that. Well, the parents got involved with them at home, and they developed these elaborate programs. And we even had some of them come and show them to the board. But that was not just for the students and the teachers. I bought computers for the board. They'd never had a computer. And, the leaders need to set the example. So they wondered what we were going to use them for. Well, they did not know at that time. I had asked my technology person to find me somebody who could write computer code and develop a program that I wanted. So she brought in a young man. I never will forget, he walked in. He was in his mid to late 20s. He was a Greek hunk. He was an absolutely stunning, good-looking young man. His name was Artie Ioannidis. Artie sat down across my desk, and I looked at him, and I thought, well, we're going to have to find out what he's made of. And so I started questioning, and he said, yeah, I can do that. I can do this. I can do this other. He had a company that he hadn't had up running. I think it was himself and one other, called Emerald Data Solutions here in Marietta. So I said, Artie, if you can do what I've got in mind, I'm going to make you famous. Okay. So he got up and left. I said, I'll see you in 2-3 weeks. You bring me what you got. 2 or 3 weeks, Artie came back, and he had it on a thumb drive, and I put it in my computer. And I kind of liked what he was doing. And I said, move this over here, get rid of that, move this up, enlarge it. And I gave him all kind of instructions. He took the thumb drive, left. A couple of weeks, he comes back again. We go through this 2 or 3, 4 times. Artie developed a program that what is known today as Board Docs, D-O-C-S. And I rolled it out to my board in December of whatever year it was. They had their computers, you see. And what it did was, prior to having these computers, my executive assistant would have to put together a document about this thick for each board meeting. And the board couldn't see them until they got there. So they're having to fly by their pants at the meeting and vote. And I wanted to bring translucence to that process. So we began putting everything on this Board Docs program. The board from their home could access it and see what was coming up on the board meeting weeks in advance and be prepared to ask questions and know what they're going to be voting on. So it prepared the board. Then we also were able to put all of that information on the screen, and anybody coming to the boardroom could see it on the screen. Now, Emily expanded that by putting on live streaming. And so we started out doing that kind of stuff. Well, it became an instant hit. I did 3 or 4 national presentations and wrote it up for the National School Board Association. They invited our board to do a major presentation in New Orleans at the Marconi Center. And so I took the whole board, flew them down to New Orleans, and we did a presentation. The room was one of the size, really, it would hold about 500 people. And I told Artie, I said, get your wife, you're going with us. And I want you to make sure that when we find the room, that you make sure there's a good connection between our computer and the internet, because we got to We're going to put this show on for these people, show them what it's like. Well, I got there, and I didn't see a live connection. And so Artie comes bebopping in about 10 minutes before we're supposed to start. I said, Artie, where's the connection? I've got the computer, the laptop. Well, where's the connection? They had these huge screens all around us so that everybody could see what was going on. He took off like a jackrabbit and came back in a few minutes just smiling. And I said, what are you smiling about? He said, they got Wi-Fi. I said, really? It works? Well, we're going to find out. I thought, my heart just dropped because here we were, the room filled up. We had people standing around the walls and people out in the hall trying to get in. They wanted to know how they become more transparent with their board proceedings. We fired up the computer, it hopped on the Wi-Fi, and we accessed our board docs. And we went to a particular board meeting, and they could see everything that the board was voting on and what the rationale was for, everything about it. Complete translucence with the public. When it was over with, Artie was covered up with board members from all over the United States wanting his product. And he came to see me and I said, Artie, when we started this process, I told you I'd make you famous. I didn't tell you I'd make you rich, but it did. And he has his product, board docs, in school districts in every state, this union. It is a phenomenal product. And it was then expanded to city governments and county governments because it's generic. It's documents that everybody can see. So he went on to, he lives out in Park City, Utah now. And I don't know, he's probably got 1,000 employees or more. But
so he's a wealthy man right now.
He's very wealthy. And as a sidebar, Marietta receives all of its board docs, updates, training, free of charge.
It's the least they could do.
From now on.
Well, you know, that's what's interesting about that in some respects, just even getting outside Cobb County. Cobb County has had an effect in the whole Southeast on things we've done.
Yeah.
And you did the same thing.
Yeah.
It changed history to some degree.
History. Actually did. Actually did. I was really surprised at the reaction. I knew it was good. I just didn't know it was that good. And it was. And he's become very, very prominent in what he does.
He didn't share any of that money with you, did he?
No, I don't get anything. I did it for the school district. That was my main concern.
There was a lot going on in the time that you were in the superintendent's role. What were the biggest accomplishments you think you played in helping our county continue to grow in a positive way?
I think opening the magnet school, opening Marietta High School, improving facilities, the introduction of technology. Those are some of the big waves that moved us forward as a people, and the improvement in academic performance. That's what it was all about. it was not always pretty. I remember we had a controversy that I got myself into with our math teachers, and it was coming up time for math adoption and math textbook adoption, and I had recommended some textbooks, and the math folks didn't want them, and they wanted these other textbooks. There was a division about how to teach math. Now, it came down to a board meeting. There was a lot of saber rattling on both sides of the fence, and the board was tasked with making a decision. I got up from my chair, walked around to the podium, faced my board, and said, you need to adopt this particular set of textbooks for the teaching of math for the next several years in Marietta. The teacher's representative stood up and said, don't do it. Do these other books. So there it was before the board. And I went back around to my chair and sat down, waited for the vote. And they said publicly, we hire only one person. That's our superintendent. He hires the rest of them. If we don't do what he tells us to do in this matter, then why do we have him here? So they approved my recommendation, infuriated the math teachers. And we bought the books and we instituted the program, and I hired a person to make sure everybody was doing what they're supposed to do.
From a business perspective, you may not have ever thought about this, but I was moved in Southern Company from Birmingham over to Atlanta. And my wife stayed over there until my daughter graduated from high school, which was about 6-7 months.
Yeah.
And so I could live anywhere I wanted to.
Yeah.
My office was downtown Atlanta. And I started looking around. And I chose Cobb County because of the school system.
Right.
So from a business perspective, what you did, which is not like one big event, was to make sure there were quality students that kept our brand high.
Right.
And if Marietta's school system had dipped, then you could brand all of Cobb County's education as negative.
Right.
Repeat a little of what I said, but in your own words. Because I really do think this, Harold. I think what y'all did to build a school system that was recognized the way it was had a lot to do with businesses that came in here. We still, even today, we're recruiting business. They look at school systems and you don't even know it.
Yeah, yeah. That's. I know because I was involved with the chamber. The Chamber of Commerce, actively sought our input, and we participated with the chamber and other business organizations because we understand that we exist for a purpose. That main purpose is educating children, but preparing them to the level that the business community needs them to enter their workforce. So that was always a driving force behind what is it we need to do here. And the business community is very important.
When I've been around places and I talk about the myriad of school system that you are a part of, it always gets great reviews, except these critics that criticize it.
Yeah, we had fun.
I mean, even when Emily was superintendent of the year, it's just another branding element of our school system.
Right.
And, Talente, you remember that company?
Who?
Talente. It's a global, they make what's not yogurt? What's the other?
Ice cream?
No, it's something like
Gelato?
Gelato. Largest in the world.
Yeah.
And they came to Marietta because of your school system. You probably didn't even know that.
No, I didn't.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Our schools don't just like have this big whip. They did this and the world changed.
Right.
And some people did, but it's about maintaining and supporting the growth that we have had and keeping the brand of Cobb County and your school system strong.
Well, sometimes doing the right thing is not the easiest thing to do. When I came to Marietta, it was, I don't know, within a year or two, I was needing to propose a tax increase. I mean a real tax increase, a millage increase for schools, maintenance and operations. And so I recommended a 2.5 mil increase at one time. And our taxes went from whatever it was to 17.97. You had to have a board who was, in sync, of one mind, to be able to do something like that. And we passed that millage increase. I can remember driving in the parade at the 4th of July, having people scream at me from the sidelines, don't raise our taxes. But it had to be done. It hadn't been done in I don't know how long. And we were just getting ready to go into a recession. And so the board raised them to 17.97. That was back in 2002, 2003. It's been 17.97 to this day. And it helped get the system through the recession. Nobody's had to raise them again because we bit the bullet and did what needed to be done at the time it needed to be done. And those are the kinds of decisions that have made Cobb County great.
And if you wouldn't mind saying this on camera, we've now had 4 or 5 people just say, this is the way we do it, Cobb. This is the way we do it in there. We labeled it the Cobb way, but that's one of the things Bob Trillo was talking about, that little we have a unique, it's about boards, quality of board members. It's about people like you. It's about how we have partnerships between the school systems and the business community. There's a whole bunch of things, but it's the Cobb way that really makes it. It's not arrogance. It's just that's what makes us different.
We've had a history of people, leaders in Cobb County, who would do the right thing, even though it's not the easiest thing to do. One of my best friends, Butch Thompson. Butch is a prince of a man, an inspiration to me. He's in my Sunday school class. And I had a great deal of respect for him, as did many others, for his giving spirit. He served on the hospital board. He served as a county commissioner for a couple of terms. He lived in Cobb County when Cobb County was primarily farms. And he developed his business and became very successful. He used to tell me, do the right thing. That's the only way to do it. And that's what he did. And it was not always the easy thing to do. And when you were getting ready to pull the trigger on making a decision, you know you're going to have conflicts. But you do it because it's the right thing to do. That has been the hallmark of Cobb County.
Interesting. I had him on my list to interview, and also had Harris Hines actually. I didn't know this, but I had him scheduled the week after that. I had him on the schedule. We've lost some very important people in this county.
Oh yeah, certainly have.
TW Ward,
TW, he just died not long ago either. He's a really popular, influential person. TW Ward. I could go look it up. It's in my file. Questions? Anything? No. Anything else you thought about? Well, go ahead. Let's get something on the record. Talk about Otis Brumman, Senior. A lot of people have love-hate relationships with him. Some people just had hate, some had love, as I said earlier. So, how was your relationship with Otis, and what did it take for you to be successful or less painful?
At the beginning, we had a very tumultuous relationship. But as time went on and the high school was opened, the things got much, much better. I have to recognize Senator Isaacson. Right after the phone call that Otis gave me, where I laid out all the numbers, there was a series of castigating editorials in the MDJ. That even my son and daughter were questioning me about. And everything heated up to a red hot fire here in Marietta. And one day my secretary came in, my executive assistant, Diane May. She said, Senator Isaacson's out in the lobby. He was wondering if you had a minute. I said, yeah, I think I've got a minute. Please show him in. Johnny walked in, sat down right across from me. And anybody that knows Johnny knows how he is. And very calmly, politely, he said, what's going on? And I said, Johnny, here's what's going on. And after Johnny and I had our little talk, he left the office. That was the end of it. No more castigating editorials. Everything's fine. It stopped. And from that point on, Otis, he liked the idea of the magnet school. You got an article there that I gave you about what he wrote about it. He liked the idea of the high school and what it was doing. He liked the idea that the kids were increasing their academic performance. He was for all the same things that I was for. We just had different ways of getting there. And when I retired, he came to my retirement, brought Otis Jr. And in that room, in the corner, sits a Brumby rocker.
They gave that to you for the time.
Through the PTA, yeah.
How special is that? That's a good note to end on.
Since you were I know you were mostly in the high school side of things, but since you were in education, can you talk a little bit about what places like Kennesaw State or Chattahoochee Tech or back in the day Southern Poly, what that kind of meant to Cobb County from the education
and the partnerships?
Yeah, the higher education in Cobb County.
Look at David.
Oh, is higher education in Cobb County is very important. Kennesaw State University spearheads that. And Marietta and Cobb County schools were instrumental in getting Kennesaw State started. Marietta and Cobb County went together and bought the land. And the land was given to the regents if they would build a college. Kennesaw College was opened up on that land. The Marietta City Schools and Cobb County Schools and Cobb County government went in to buy.
What year was that, roughly?
Oh, Joe Daniel can tell you all about it because
we probably have it on tape.
Because his daddy was instrumental in that. And so Kennesaw College got started that way. And then under Betty, it just exploded with growth and has continued to explode with growth. And I had to, after I retired, I had a unique experience of being able to be an adjunct professor in the Department of Ed Administration and taught master's level students. And so the financial impact of Chattahoochee Tech, Kennesaw State University, and other educational institutions have an enormous impact on Cobb County, positive impact. So,
well, one thing you might find is an interesting statistic, depending on which study you look at, of the adult residents in Cobb County, 47% have at least a bachelor's degree. 47%. That's the highest in Georgia, but 12th highest in the United States of America.
right.
And
Right.
that integration you're talking about.
Absolutely.
How were y'all involved in the Southern Poly formation? Think business and public affairs.
You know, I can't. My memory fails me on that one.
Well, it started a little bit, well, a lot different than KSU did. We've got somebody that talks about. That, so.
Somebody else would know more about that now.
How about the technical school, Chattahoochee Tech? What interface?
Oh, well, Chattahoochee Tech got started actually in the offices of Marietta City Schools. We were we had their office in the school system for, I don't know, several years until they spun off and got their own campus. But they started out as a vocational technical school and have just grown exponentially after spinning off and getting their own land.
Well, see, Chattahoochee Tech has also been a recruiting tool. That workforce is the most important thing
Sure.
for businesses today.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are skilled jobs. They're not the
Right.
theoretical jobs. In a lot of respects, and you probably haven't thought about this, that had a lot to do with changing history. Getting Chattahoochee Tech formed and then where it took off.
Right. We were on the formation side. When it took off, it just took off on its own. But Chattahoochee was Tech, with their certification programs, computers coming into the workforce in all kinds of new ways, they helped spur that development. And as a result, this part of the state flourished.
Yeah, they're the largest in Georgia.
Yeah.
Chattahoochee.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
I want to tell you also, and thank you very, very much.
Sure.
When we start doing the editing and cutting and writing the script, there may be some very specific things we want to come back and talk to you
Okay,
about.
that's fine.
Don't know that, but just a heads up on that.
Okay.
And, our timeline is after Thanksgiving,
Okay.
between Thanksgiving and Christmas, have a final product. or at least a semi-final product till you sign off.
Yeah.
Here's where we're using you, and if you just say I don't like it there, or I don't like the fact you said damn and whatever, and then we'll go with that. So thank you. It's been a great interview, and I appreciate your time.